And boom, and we're live. Well, good evening and welcome to another edition of Life is People. And we were just saying before we went live, this is a conversation that's been, well, I would say probably over a year in the making, man, since I've been just left with many questions since our last conversation. But so without any further ado, how are you doing tonight, Kevin?
I'm doing really good, thanks, and thanks for inviting me back. And I think you're right. I think the last time we spoke was August 2015, around that time, August, September. And I think from about 2, 3, maybe 4 months after that call, we've been talking about, touching base again and having a more in-depth discussion about some of the things that we spoke about on that call. And it just hasn't come around until now, and so I'm very happy to be back speaking to you. And we've been messaging back and forth over that course of time, and I'm really excited to hear what you have to say as well, because from the messages you've been sending me, it sounds like you've been doing a lot of talking about and thinking about the Brehon Law and some of the other ideas that we spoke about on the last call. So I'm interested to hear what you have to say as well.
Well, that seems a very fine point to start with because from the last conversation, since then, I went away and did the whole ancient island, culture and society course which you put out.
That's
So,
right. Yeah,
so
yeah,
that
yeah.
was absolutely, and again, I tried to spread the word of that, and anybody listening, please go out and take part in that course because it gives you a very good base sort of understanding of where you're coming from. Now, one of the things that, like I said, that stemming from our last conversation was again the myriad of questions, and I think one of the questions that really comes up over and over again, and I think it is maybe a sort of good place to sort of relate back to you, and I think it's always a base point to start with is what's the most applicable thing. And I know I like this, what I like about what you're doing in your action in your life, you're actually carrying this through with Students for Liberty. So before we sort of go any further and actually start talking about the Brehon Law in depth, just give me a kind of overview of what's happened since we last spoke with Students for Liberty, because I know there's been a lot going on, and I know you've spoken at many conferences and stuff.
Okay. Well, there's probably quite a lot I could talk about there, in fairness. When we spoke the last time, I had just recently joined Students for Liberty as a local coordinator. And what a local coordinator is in our parlance is somebody who represents the organization locally. And the mission, my mandate, if you will, was simply to promote the ideas of liberty, which means social liberty, economic liberty, personal liberty, and that's another word for freedom. And for me personally, it's always been, I mean, how I characterize freedom is through the amount of choice available to me. Um, so, as a local coordinator, my mission was to try and promote the ideas of liberty in Ireland and the UK. And in this regard, it was like also talking to new students, trying to get people to join the organization. And I think then actually when we were speaking, I had joined the executive board, which made me the regional director for the UK and Ireland. Because at the time, I mean, the movement wasn't very big in Ireland, this specific type of movement, a student-driven, student-led movement for social change based on the ideas of personal freedom. But I'm really happy to say that, like, since we last spoke, I mean, only in the end of November there, just a couple of weeks ago, we had our first regional conference for the UK and Ireland that was based in Dublin. I mean, we had one in London the previous year, but this was the first one in Ireland. And I mean, it was a really enjoyable event. We had people from all over Europe had come to this. We had a lot of people, obviously, from Ireland as well. And it was a chance for us to showcase, our progress in the last year. We've got a lot more leaders now in Ireland as well. And to invite the people who are already in Ireland, like people from the Hibernia Forum, Jared Casey, who's a professor who wrote some amazing books. Libertarian Anarchy Against the State is one of them. He also wrote a book about the biography of Murray Rothbard, who was a great libertarian philosopher. And it was like really, in my opinion, a celebration of these kind of loose strands of organizations or ideas, people or ideas that organizations were promoting. And it was the first time we kind of brought them together to celebrate that. But I mean, that's only kind of a small thing. The truth is, we had more than 20 conferences like that all over Europe. Athens, Iceland, Georgia, Italy, Germany, Czech Republic had two. there's a very well established freedom movement in the Czech Republic, I'm happy to say. And each one of these conferences was a project that was organized locally by students who are just passionate about the ideas and who want to bring the ideas to more people. So that's really kind of, in a nutshell, what I've been doing in the last couple of months. Probably one of the biggest things that's happened to me this year that I'm most proud of and most happy about is that I was actually employed by Students for Liberty. So I'm now a staff member, and my role is local coordinator program manager, which means my responsibility is to take care of the entire European-wide local coordinator program. So that means I'm interviewing new applicants. I'm also trying to support the existing applicants that we have with different opportunities or training and things like this. And in August of this year, we had our first ever top 100 retreat. Previously, we would have retreats where we would bring everybody who was accepted that year away for a training weekend. This year, we tried to do something differently, where we took the best 100 leaders from all across Europe. And there were people there from more than 30 European countries. I'm sure that I've never been in a more international setting, surrounded by so many different countries, young people who care enough about the world that they live in, who care enough about the ideas of freedom, that they sacrifice their time. They have chosen a path where they, spend hours a week having meetings with their colleagues to try and come up with creative ideas and creative ways to promote liberty on their campuses, whether that's organizing events or tablings, or we also had things like the Free Speech Project, No Nanny campaigns, which are really exciting, and we're going to be doing a lot more of that in 2017. And I had a role in the planning of this event in terms of like the training that we were offering. So we had training on things like public speaking, video production, event organizing, fundraising. And really what we're trying to do is, as an organization, be an incubator for tomorrow's success, for tomorrow's leaders, to tap into people's strengths that they already have, to highlight them, to bring them out and give them a platform to become great leaders and become better people. And I can certainly say, in terms of, from my own experience, being involved with European Students for Liberty has made me a better person. That has given me skills and experiences that I wouldn't have been able to get, or would have been harder for me to get in any other way. And it's really accelerated my passion and legitimized it and given it a sense of professionalism, so that I feel very strongly that I have a life that is meaningful, and a life that I feel great when I wake up in the morning, knowing that I work for an organization that's doing such good things across Europe to promote freedom and improve people's lives. So in terms of Students for Liberty, that's really what I've been up to so far.
Well, one of the things I wanted you to speak upon was, I don't know, recently we've been speaking in private, but you did you spoke at a conference with a lot of programmers and coders who are, and I'm fascinated because this again alludes to something that we spoke upon in our last conversation, that there's an ancient wisdom in the Brehon laws and stuff that is so more applicable to today's, where we are right at this moment, the end of 2016, than ever before. I think it's even more applicable than the last, since we last spoke a year ago. And I'm fascinated to know how, because I can tell you my experiences from my end of where path I've journeyed down. But I'm fascinated to, when you've gone in, especially with the knowledge you have on it, and you're there amongst coders and the programmers and the people who are, in essence, building the new paradigm. I wondered how they found what you were saying to them.
Yeah, and I can actually remember when we spoke the last time, and you were asking me questions like this, and I had to stretch a little bit to find examples of what you're asking me about, how it could improve technology, or how it could relate to the, let's call it, the digital revolution. And I was surprised myself when I was invited to speak at this convention. It was the Hackers Congress by Paralelini Polis, which is an amazing setup that they have here. They have their own building, and in it they have the Institute of Crypto Anarchy, the Maker Space, Bitcoin Coffee, the first ever Bitcoin vending machine, and Bitcoin ATM. And they're really, I would say, at the forefront of what we would call the digital revolution, or what I would call a practical freedom or practical liberty. So it's great to be able to sit down and talk about the ideas in a hypothetical sense or in an academic sense, but really what I think is going to change the world is when people see it in a practical sense, when they can see what the ideas can give people, like the technology that's being made can give people in their own pocket, especially with likes to cryptocurrencies and things like that. So the event, they asked me to come and speak at this about ancient Irish anarchy, which was the same topic that I spoke about at the ESFL conference earlier this year in March. And since our talk, actually, I gave it more consideration and I had some more content to talk about, let's say. And I think, like, what's interesting about it is it suggests to me that, like, a good idea is a good idea and it stays a good idea. What's interesting now is that these ideas are becoming more and more relevant, I think, as the globe, the world is becoming like a global community. I mean, if you go back in history not too long ago, when communication wasn't so advanced, you were mostly concerned about international news, what was happening in your own country, maybe your neighboring country, fine. As we've evolved with the internet and as we've we start to become more aware and of what's happening in other countries much further afield. So some people say, like, oh, the world is in such a terrible place now because of all this bad stuff happening, but really, like, probably a lot of that bad stuff was happening all the time, but now the difference is we have instant access to the knowledge about that through communication. So our mindset or our mental conception of our village has grown now to encompass pretty much the whole world. So now we're looking at, okay, technology has given us this mindset. So what else? I mean, how do we adapt technologically to exist in this, let's say, global community? And a lot of the answers that are coming out in the digital revolution, in terms of like the blockchain, or having blockchain contracts or escrow, and having reputation based forums, or marketplaces, and these are ideas that have existed for a very long time in the past, when it was just a village or it was just your very small local community. So in that sense, you can say that the tech world is creating solutions for the fact that we have now become a global mindset. We have kind of a global consciousness. So maybe I could give a couple of examples of what I mean by this. So I mentioned the escrow service there, which, as I'm sure you'll know, is a way that we can do business online with each other, given the fact that Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies are untraceable. So if I don't know you, I can't look you in the eye, I can't build up a reputation or a relationship or a rapport with you because you're on the other side of the planet, but you have a product that I want to buy. How can I buy in good faith? How can I trust that I'm going to get that product, that you're actually going to send it to me if I send the money? So one of the answers that has come up for this is this idea of the escrow, where it's kind of like a third party holds onto the funds until the product gets to me, and then he releases the funds, or he holds part of the funds. And in a sense, this is kind of like when we look at the old Brehon Law system, the system of pledges that they used to use when they were engaging in contracts. So the similar principles applied. Bearing in mind, they didn't have a police force, they didn't have a central judiciary, and the king or the authority, the elected authority, would never step in and force somebody to honor a contract in that sense. The sort of protections that we use today in a statist society. What the technological world has done is given us non-statist, non-centralized solutions to this. So what they would do is they would engage in a contract, and for every term in the contract, they would exchange some sort of pledge for each item. So, or it could be also what could be done is that an impartial third party could hold on to the property of the contract until it was honored. So this is when we had the village. It was easier to do that because you could ask somebody who was known to be trustworthy to oversee this. But in terms of making a contract where, so the first item on the agreement, I would give you like maybe something that's really important to me, like maybe a family heirloom, or something of wealth or something of value to me for that item, for that term of the contract. And you would do the same, and we would exchange valuable items for each term on the contract in such a way that we are definitely going to honor that agreement, because I want all my stuff back and you want all your stuff back. So they made contracts then in such a way that it was very let's say like undesirable to not honor your contracts. And you can kind of see this in the tech world, and also the way that the blockchain has this ability to make a permanent record of an agreement or a transaction that has happened. So it can't be altered, it can't be changed, it can't then fraudulently be changed. And a couple of the people that we have had on speaking at our events, one of them that springs to mind would be Yanina from BitNation. She speaks about how they have used this technology in Ghana, for example, for land agreements, sale of land agreements, or marriage contracts and things like this. Because especially in countries where you have corrupt governments, I mean, we are kind of okay in the West. I mean, we can obviously, both of us can find a lot to complain about in our own countries, but I mean, it's pretty good compared to a lot of other countries. So this technology, especially in those sorts of places where you have very corrupt government and fraud, can help those countries, because it creates, as I said, a permanent, unchangeable record.
Well, yeah, this is one of the many disruptive elements that people haven't really understood about the blockchain. I mean, I think people are obsessed with sometimes the price of the Bitcoin and its value to compare to fiat, but the truly disruptive element is what you just spoken upon there, my friend, because the idea of having, like you say, a record of constant that's going to be held indefinitely, it just changes the game. Now, one of the things that I think, like you said, that again relates to the Brehon Law. But what I find fascinating, I keep coming back to this over and over again, and it's fascinating because a lot of the conversations I have with programmers and people like this it's almost like the starting point we always think of, because I just look at it and think this was a time. That's a debatable how long this went on for, how many thousands of years or hundreds of years, but this is when free organized people actually, over that time period, over the momentum and the history and this learning things, they organized a great way of doing things without centralization. And we can learn so much of that because all that technology is doing is breaking down that centralization. So there's still the great wisdom to learn from how cultures evolved and carried on. And for, as you would know, and you can speak upon more, for a long continuous period of time. Now, one of the things that, again, I carry through, and I think it's really applicable. It goes back to what the first sort of point I had made to you about, actual day-to-day practical things that can be, could be implemented right now, and it doesn't cost word of mouth. It doesn't cost anything else, but it can almost be like a meme, something we could spread. And I think it's just, and I want to hear your thoughts on it particularly, but I just think it's something that can be definitely implemented. Now, I've tried, I'm trying to think every way I can implement this in N99 and what I'm building. But I wanted you to speak upon it really from your sort of knowledge about honor pricing. Now, I think it's, like I said before, I think it's honor pricing would change the world as much as the blockchain has. So I want you to sort of speak upon honor pricing and how it would work, and what again, the practical ways that. Again, as I say, I've spoken to many people, and I think once I tell them about it, they're like, "Oh yeah." And if nothing else, from my angle, if it's just a meme that spreads amongst the world, I think that's a good thing. But from your perspective, I mean, how would you think practically this could work, and maybe give people who haven't got an understanding of what honor pricing is, how it did work back in the Brehon days, or the
Okay.
Brehon days?
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe to start at the beginning, then, the concepts of honor price, if I remember correctly, was also known as enachlan in the Irish language, was the idea that your reputation had a value, and the value of your reputation, you could say, changed your standing in your community, as you could imagine. So the way honor price worked was basically your reputation was based on a couple of things, but one of the main things it was based on was your merit. This was your contribution, your ability within your society, within your community. Important thing to point out with this is that your honor price, your status, was really relative to your community, as you might imagine. I mean, if I have my own honor price in my own community, people know me. People, I grew up with people, I've done business with people. So your reputation was based on the fact that people knew who you were and they knew that they could trust you. If I went just to another community and they didn't know who I was, then as you might imagine, I didn't have a status, I didn't have a reputation. There was a couple of offices in the Irish system that carried their honor price regardless of where they were, and that was like the likes of the Brehons, for example, or the Philly, the poets. So they could travel around and they could retain their honor price. But just to give maybe, I actually spoke about this today, believe it or not. I was given a talk to a group of visiting Mexican students in the university that I'm now studying about the Brehon Law, and I spoke about the concept of honor price. And what I find interesting, it's my own personal observation, is that it seems to me that the legal systems of today have kind of flipped this on its head, where the wealthy and powerful people, those who are considered to be of high standing in society, let's say politicians, bankers, and so on, they seem to get away with doing things like white collar crime doesn't seem to be punished in the same way as regular crime. So in that sense, it seems to me like the legal system is kind of being flipped on its head, where the poorer or the less fortunate, if you want, seem to be punished more severely by the system. Which is an interesting observation, because if you come back to the idea of honor price, how that would have worked is the higher status you had in society, the higher regard or the higher standard you were held to by that society. So, for example, if a man of high rank committed a similar crime to that of a man of low rank, he would have to pay a higher fine. He would have to be there'd be a greater consequence for that, because he was supposed to know better. He had everything else was going for him. He had a better education. He had wealth, so he shouldn't behave in such a way that betrayed his standing or betrayed his status. There was a flip side to this, though, however, which was if a man of high rank had an offence committed against him. For example, if I committed an offence against somebody who was a higher rank than I, or higher, compared to if I committed an offence against someone who was the same rank as me, I would have to pay a greater fine for the crime against the man of high rank. And this was supposed to be because as a society we respected the dignity of his standing. We respected the fact that through his merit he had that status. And so in a sense there was a kind of a hierarchy here. I mean, it's I don't think there's anything wrong to point that out. I often say to people, the only thing worse than a hierarchy is not recognizing that there's a hierarchy when one is present. And we live in a world where not everybody is the same, not everybody is equal, that some people are faster, some people are smarter, some people are stronger, whatever. And the difference is our legal system today says justice is blind, so that everybody should be treated the exact same regardless of your standing. But in the early Irish system, it took the blindfold off, and it said we're willing to take account of the differences in individuals, and we're going to make a calculation that determines the fairest outcome. So bearing that in mind, and you asked like how could this be applied practically speaking today? Well, one example, and I don't know if it's a great example, because I hear people in the kind of the blockchain technological community not speaking very highly about this website, but it's Steemit. And for those who don't know, Steemit is like an online forum where you post articles, you write blog posts, and they get voted on by other people. And the more votes you get, the more actual cryptocurrency. You get paid in cryptocurrency for creating good content. This is an amazing innovation, I think, on the internet in general, and I would like to see more of it in the future. I think it will go this way. So you could imagine if you put a great post on Facebook, Facebook makes a lot of money from advertising for the content that you put up there, that we all put up there. So if you put a, basically the way Steemit would work is you get a share of the value that you're generating. But the interesting thing with Steemit is that there's different grades of user. I think they're called like minnows, dolphins, and whales, I think. And this is basically like if you go on as a new user, you haven't created anything, you have no reputation in the Steemit community, you're going to be called a minnow. And as you're there for a long time, you've put up lots of really good blog posts, you're starting to be recognized as an expert in the area that you're writing on, you will become a dolphin. And if you're excellent, or if you've been on the community for such a long time and people love your posts and you're an amazing writer, you'll eventually be a whale. And this is a very kind of crude, let's say, type of this status system, this honor prize system. But what's interesting is that the different grades influence the post. So if a whale comes and votes on your post and votes it up, you're going to get a lot more cryptocurrency from Steemit. So just to point this out as well, I think one of the ways, I mean, I'm not an expert on the blockchain, not by a long stretch, but I am learning. I'm trying to learn about it. I think one of the ways in which it works is in the sense of nodes or hubs of people who kind of voluntarily associate with each other. And that's very kind of similar in a sense to the way the TUA worked. They were kind of like economic, social hubs where people voluntarily associated with each other. So in order for honor prize to work today, I think that unless somebody can come up with some sort of reputation recording system that was relevant across the world and that people voluntarily accepted it, which I find that kind of hard to see happening. It could work in terms of like clusters of communities where you have your N99 community, for example, or there's different blockchain communities. And people within that community will develop their reputation and their honor prize in terms of the merit that they contribute. Well, I think the final point I want to say on that is we do this anyway. I mean, like you as being one of the key players in the N99 technology will have a certain standing in the eyes of your peers in the same community based on that. It's the same with maybe like in Students for Liberty actually is a great example because it works as a meritocracy and people are seen to be great leaders. People stand out when they stand out. People stand out when they contribute and when they create value. It's admired by other people who are in that immediate proximity. So that's the way honor prize kind of worked. And in the early Irish system, it was formalized in a way that helped the functioning of society and helped in the administration of justice.
Well, yeah, I mean, completely. And I think what's fascinating about what you just spoken upon there is something that I'm finding more and more as I go down the journey of what we're talking about. You know, I mentioned this earlier on, but we're only starting to understand that this way of living, this way of dealing with it, has been done with by people, and you know, as we're speaking upon here, the Irish and the Gaelics for a long time. And what we're finding is, with all the technology we've got in our hands, it's still going to be the crucial point of that human-to-human interaction. And this is what I think what you spoke upon then about the reputation, because one of the things I'm sure you may find, we live in a world where there's so many ideologies, and you know the idea of meritocracy is being lost, and then you get lost in this idea of ideologies. And one of the ones that I hear over and over again, and I don't really want to sort of go down the rabbit hole too much, but it's just this whole idea of almost the mob rule, or you know the idea that everybody should just have equal status all the time. And this is what I love about the Brehon Law. And again, this isn't just some idea that was written down. This is something that was implied by a lot of people, and they lived their way by it. And I love the idea, and it's right what you're just speaking upon, because, for instance, as an artist or a musician, if I have to go through a lot of hours, and it ties into, again, something else, the 7 grades of wisdom. I have to go through those different, you know, and by the time I get to the end, I should rightly have that reputation and rightly feel that if someone comes along and takes that, hey, that's, you know, that should be, you know, understood. But one of the things I like I think needs to be spoken upon as well. In this association of free association, is which I get asked a lot about. People say, "Oh, that's all well and good, but what happened? What's to stop someone just coming on, stealing all someone's tracks, making out they were, I don't know. Let's take a band. Let's take the Sealing Demons. Someone comes up, puts all the Sealing Demons tracks up, tries to steal their reputation." Now, again, this worked really well, as my understanding, in back in the Brehon days, because you could, like you said, if you had a reputation in one place, when you walked into a new tribe, you didn't just carry that through. You had to go to someone of a high status and gain up your reputation. And I think this is really applicable, because we do live in a world where we're going to see this more and more. We're becoming into a virtual tribe where we're not just ground by the people we see, but our reputations can carry a long way. And equally, this is the flip side of what it is. My reputation or it should never, as much as you've got your reputation of what you've learned in your studies, like you say, if I ever saw you as a human being walk into a room and go, "Ha ha, I am Kevin Flanagan Coombes, I know," it'd be like, whoa, what's happened to the ego check, man? And that's what I loved about how the Brehons dealt with it. It's like, no, you couldn't just walk into somewhere else. And this is one of the things I think can be applied with the new blockchain technologies, and the new technologies coming, because it's that idea of when you walk into somewhere else, you have to start and go, "Hey, I'm just a nobody, and I have to work up through meritocracy and work out what I do." And I think this goes hand in hand with what I'm seeing day by day with the new paradigm built and the new technology built. And I think this is why I think that there's a need to really spread these ideas about, because I think one of the things that I hear a lot about, and I don't really hear people say to me about Brehon Law or anything like that, but they talk a lot about the idea of, and I spoke to you in Pro about people I know personally who decided that, okay, I'm going to go off grid, like in the States, and say, hey, I even disassociate my name, because, and this is what, again, plays back to the Brehon Law. When you left one tribe, you could take on the name of a new tribe. As I understand it, I've got this all understanding right, that if I left one tribe and go and join the Flanagans, I would take on the, if the Flanagans took me in, I'll take their name and I'll disassociate from my old name. And this is really, again, this has been tried and tested out in your part of in Ireland for thousands of years. And I think there's lessons to be learned. So my question to you is really, how do we get this out? How do we get, because I think I've heard you reflect on this many times, that I don't know if it's changed anything now, but I'm sure, and I've heard you say this, if I were to fly into Dublin today and ask 100 Irish people, what percentage of those, 60 out of 100 would know about Brehon Law, 20 out of 100? So how do we get this spread, man? Because if it's not known in Ireland, how can we get this spread to, because it's a very wise thing, and it's the essence of not chucking away the wisdom with the new technology and carrying that through, but it's how do we carry that through? That's my question to you, and that's something that I wrestle upon a lot, and I'm sure you do. So I'd love to hear your insights.
Well, I think it's a great point, and I can tell that like you've really been thinking about this a lot, and it's the same thing that I give a lot of thought to as well with the Brehon Law Academy. And I really ask myself the question, how can we promote these ideas in a way that are voluntarily accepted and wanted? But just to kind of brush on a few of the points that you raised there, one of the items that we have in our training for the local coordinators in European Students for Liberty is an article on cracked.com that I recommend anybody listening to this to read. And it's 6 harsh truths that will make you a better person. And the first harsh truth is that the world only cares about what it can get from you. It doesn't care that you think you're a nice person, or maybe you are a nice person. It only cares about the value that you can add to their lives. And we've been, I think, brought up in a society that has educated us or kind of conditioned us to have a reaction to a statement like that. That's not a good statement. But I'm sorry, but that's actually a factual way of looking at the world. And I think we're living in a time where, I mean, you mentioned like democracy and populism. That's one of the biggest ills of our time right now. The idea of groupthink and the herd mentality and the majority rules. And one of our professors in university has mentioned that, like this, I don't know what the study was, but some paper where they said that in groups, the IQ drops. When you have a group think or when you have a group mentality, the IQ actually drops. And we'll also live in a time as well where we have this massive virtue signaling. I was talking to my roommates about this the other day, earlier tonight. Virtue signaling and, like, you know, carrying a banner of, like, you know, I'm a great person and I want you to think of me as a great person. And we see it, I mean, the tragedies that have been happening throughout Europe and the rest of the world in the last couple of years, but you don't see people putting the Lebanese flag on their Facebook picture when a bomb goes off in the Lebanon. But when it's France, let's all put a picture of France up. And this is virtue signaling. This is like, you know, you're not doing anything. It's not even solidarity, but you put your picture of France up because you're saying to your Facebook friends that, like, you know, you want to be perceived as like a good person, a nice person. But at the end of the day, what really matters is what you can give and what you can do for other people. So, this is the question: is like, how do you present the ideas, not just of Brehon Law, but also of the decentralized technological world that people are developing, and the digital revolution, as an answer to statism, as an answer to the centralized collectivist worldview that is not as old as people would like to think. It's kind of relatively new in the scheme of things, and because that system on paper gives you more. I mean, it gives you the sense of security. It gives you like a protection. It gives you, you know, the populist mindset of the centralized system of government, of politicians, and so on. It's easier, actually, to accept that way of life and to accept that worldview than to admit to yourself that you're an individual and you're kind of you're here by yourself and you have to do it alone. And the people you do it alone, but you will look for your tribe. You will look for the people who have the same mindset as you and has the same sort of belief as you, and you will try and associate with these people. But at the end of the day, if we're not adding value to our own lives and to the lives of the people around us, then what are we doing? Like, what's really the point of existing? Because this is one of the beautiful things of being a human being, is that we have this mind, we have the ability to take the natural resources of the world around us and create it into something better, to build ideas, to build technologies, to build products, to build, and you know, I want to say communities, but maybe like, you know, associations of people who innovate, who change, the entrepreneurial mindset, if you want to look at it that way. And this is what got us out of the caves, you know. This is the one thing that I love about human beings, is that we're never ever satisfied. We're never satisfied. We always want better. We always want to improve our living conditions, improve our society, improve our lives of people around us. And if it wasn't for that sort of thinking, we wouldn't be having a conversation like this on Wi-Fi and speaking through my phone. And you can see we have video exchange. We have all of these technological innovations that we take for granted now that have improved the lives of countless millions of people. That's that mindset. And I think that I don't know actually the answer to the question is, how do we create the meme, or how do we create the idea that spreads to people, that they say, yes, I like this idea of the decentralized world. I like the idea of I'm an individual and I'm here to create value, because it puts the onus on people then to take responsibility for their life and then the consequences of that. And that's not really, it's harder. So it's a harder sell.
I think you're right, Kevin, and I think to me, I think that when I contemplate this question, as I do, you know, I spend a lot of time contemplating and meditating on this very point. I think the way to do it, and I think you spoke upon it then, is there is a need, and I think it relates to the last point I was making. We live in a world where, like you said, there's a lot of collectivism going on. There's a lot of this mindset and ideologies, and one of the things that we do need, and has got us to this point, is the idea of, ultimately, we need greedy people. We need people who are just, you know, heads down, will go ahead and just do that, because we need that as every, you know, it's the entrepreneurial idea. For every 10 ideas that work, you know, 10 ideas that spring us a thought, one may work. I mean, and I think this is needed. And I think what's crucial, and what you're speaking upon, is not only the fact of that this is kind of like I'm saying, it's nothing new to us as a species, but it's crucial. And I think one of the things that where I think one of the wisdoms that we can get from this point, and I think this is what I really wanted to focus upon about how you can do this, is it's goes back to what I was saying before. It's about living your life, and I think if you can live your life like this, then it gives, like you said, it expounds of that. You don't need to go out and preach or anything. Like, people are just like, oh, what you got in your life that's different to everybody else? And it's not, like you said, it's not going out and saying, go and follow me. It's more a case of like, well, go and discover what's already been done and stuff like this. And I think one of the things, again, and I think it goes back to what I was saying before, we have to get back to this human level, because one of the things I think we learned from I kind of really took away from the Brehon whole concept was that everything they were doing, and maybe because of the times they were living in, that it was all about time. And this is one of the things that you were speaking upon then, and I think this is how you can highlight this and do this, is you basically give back the time to people. Give the time to the creatives. They're the people who are the people, the natural people who are going to, just by their life alone, are, even if they don't know it, are living the Brehon law. They're living that way of life just because they're creators. And if you give them that, then they illuminate that. And the battle we've all got, and this is what, I come from a creative and artistic point of view. This is one of the things that we do, and I find it fascinating that the old ways, in the old Brehon days, they really highlighted the poets and stuff like that, because the poets will reflect on time, and that's a battle that we all got as human beings. So anything that can give us back the time, and then it's learning to do what we do with time. And that's, I think, one of the things that we're entering right now, that the technology and how we can spread this is learning from those times. Because when you have all the time, which is one of the great white elephants in the room, we've got AI rising, it's going to take a lot of the human jobs away. So then what do we do with human people? And again, you just have to reflect back to Brehon laws and go, okay, what did they do? They spent, 12 years learning the studies of wisdom, 12 years, a whole life learning poetry. And again, these are all things that I think we can learn, and I think these are the practical ways you can implement that. Is, as I say, give time back to the people who will highlight it. And I think the other thing as well, Kevin, and I think this is, again, I think goes hand in hand with the, and I think it's at the heart, the focus, what I try to do in 99, is if you can give people resources so they can get the time, and then they have the ability to create, when they're in that moment, they just naturally expose and expound the ideas that we're talking about. And it gives them also the time to explore and to have the knowledge, which then gives the idea that it spreads and spreads and spreads. And I think this is crucial to where we go forward, is like you just said, particularly, and I think this is in the times that we live in, of understanding, like you said, that we're, and it's what the creative people, and it's what the old times understood, is that we're all battling time, and it's how we can get back time. And when you have got time, highlight the things that are good about time. And again, all this goes back to the Brehon law, because they dealt with this. They dealt with how to deal with time, what you're going to do with time, what you're going to do with people, and all these things. And I think all of the things that people get stressed about when they get into arguments about how society's going to run and stuff, they think, well, a lot of that's just all of the, we're fighting over the resource of time, and that wasn't really relevant back in the day. And when we have got rid of all that, which is going to come again, so it's not only the carrot and the stick. It's all about the Brehon law. There's not only the wisdoms of how to do the justice and stuff, but it's also, it gives you those little glimpses of like what we could be like if we were actually truly free. Who would be the ones with reputation? The poets, the people of crafts, the people who have done the 7 years of wisdom. These are things that I think are going to be really illuminating to people. And I think particularly, I see it particularly with this, the millennial generation coming through, that they're hungry for all this. And I think that they're hungry for the idea of, okay, I'll go away and I'll learn something and I can give back that. And I think some of these things are doing. And I think the way we can do that is just by, it goes right back to the very first conversation we had, over a year ago. It's getting this knowledge out, and I think the way of getting it out, as I said before, I think is getting it out through creators, through and we create our own narrative. So we get it out through storytellers, we get it out through musicians and artists, and it goes back to a bit, and it's again back to the old Brehon law. The writers and the poets. That's how you shape. That's how you kind of keep society in a balance. You get people who are understanding of old things, and this is how my personal one, that's a very long rambling answer, but that's how I think you can get things through, because I think time is something that we're going to have to tackle in the next 5 or 10 years as a species, about what do we do when we have time, less of it and more of it. What do we do? And I think these, again, there's some wisdoms we can learn from the Brehon Law. And I touch upon some of the things I picked upon. What on that area of time and that, what areas would you insights?
Well, I think, I mean, as you're talking there, there's quite a few things coming to mind again. And one of the interesting things about that is like the idea of like the advancements in technology, you would presume is supposed to give us more time. But when you look out at the world, at the kind of the day to day, everybody is rushing everywhere. Nobody has any time. But what the technology supposedly do, we're not in the fields anymore. We don't have to toil for 10 hours a day just to get our dinner anymore. But still, it feels like we don't have any time left. And I mean, another point on that is like one of the principles of the Brehon Law that made it different from, say, the Hindu caste system, which is slightly similar, but there's a huge, massive distinction in this. Was an old saying is fair chuinned, which meant a man is better than his birth, which means that like it doesn't matter, like reality doesn't care where you were born or how you were born and the circumstances you were born into. Because it has given you, through your mind, if you have a functioning mind, it has given you the tool to make something of your life. And not to dwell on this and not to go into the detail of it, but I would say that I haven't had an easy life. I haven't had a particularly easy childhood. I would say quite the opposite, actually, and maybe that's partly what has motivated me to be the way I am now, in the sense that like it's kind of, in this world, it's do or die. And when I spoke in the retreat that we had, the top 100 retreat in Germany in August, was one of the things I said to them was like, life is like being shot out of a cannon at a wall 3 feet away from you. And it's what you do in that space in between the cannon and the wall that matters. And we're only here for an absolute tiny blink. Such a short time in the grand scheme of things that it's actually quite insignificant. So why would you not try to use every moment of that time to like set off fireworks, to be a spark, to be something like, entertaining, to be innovative, to be, so something that other people look at and go, whoa. That's energy. And that's all we are. We're like a big ball of energy. And our job here is to kind of like explode and leave our mark on this world. And so what have you got to lose? Like, really, what have you got to lose? Imagine, just for a second, imagine how long you will be in the grave for. It's unfathomable, the amount of time we will be dead for. And I mean, I heard there's a good, like, kind of I guess it's like a tune that somebody made on YouTube of Steve Jobs talking about this, about what motivates him. And he goes, whenever he feels like stagnant, or whenever he feels like he's doing something that he doesn't really want to be doing, he thinks about his death. He remembers that, shit, I'm not going to be here forever. I'm not going to be here forever. So why the hell would I be doing something that doesn't fulfill me? And you don't know what's happening in other people's minds. When you observe people day to day, getting up and doing the 9 to 5 and going to their office and tappy, you don't know really what they're thinking, right? So, I mean, they could be fulfilled as well, and that's fine. But it looks like roboticism. Like, it looks like mundane, just, going through the motions in this big machine without any spark of creativity. And that's very tragic. I think that's probably the biggest tragedy of our time, is this idea that we have been conditioned in a way and educated in a way to think that that's a life that's lived. But I mean, and this has been in art, reflected in art and culture and society all through our history. Even like the idea of Shakespeare, to be or not to be, that is the question. And it's just why artists and writers would often have, like, maybe not often, but sometimes they would have a skull. They would keep a skull or a replica of a skull in their study or in their place where they work, to remind them that time is finite. So while you're here, like, why not do something that people go, whoa, did you see that? Like, did you see that mark that person left? And I would like that when I live my life and it's finished, that there is something like that left behind, that there's some sort of spark of memory. And at the end of the day as well, I mean, I didn't think that we would go down this track, but we're here now anyway. So at the end of the day, I think as human beings, we all crave immortality. And immortality can come in I think, two different ways. The first way is by having children and by making sure that your genetic memory stays in the reality after you die and it's passed on to generation to generation. So in a sense, I am the, the current physical representation, manifestation of the ancestors that came before me, and that I am here. They all survived. They survived all of this, harshness that they had in the past, of toiling the fields, of the cold winters, of all of that stuff. They survived, and I'm here now for that. So it's kind of like, in a sense, you owe it to them to make the genes continue after I die. But there's another way to become immortal, and that's to have a legacy of that you have changed the world in such a way that people remember you after you die, that your memory lives on. So, I mean, the only way to do that is to be a person who creates value for the world, who creates, something great. But when you create something great, it's only great in the eyes of other people. That makes it great. You could be like take Van Gogh, for example. We look at his work now and we say, oh, he was an amazing painter. Look at this beautiful art that he created, Starry Night, but when he was alive, he wasn't valued. It was like he might as well have been painting in the dark, and he didn't feel the value of that. So it's like, in the eyes of our peers, we are valued, and we can only obtain that by creating value for them. So when we talk about, let's say, like capitalism or the innovator or the entrepreneur, the way that they are, the only way to be a great person is to improve the lives of other people. That's the catch. And that's why, I don't understand, say, the anti-capitalist rhetoric. I understand the anti-corporatist rhetoric. I understand, the anti, excessive greed and this weird sort of stuff that goes on when you have a legal personality that we call a corporation. But innovation and entrepreneurship is what has made the world a better place. We take, what's his name? Bill Gates, for example. His technology has improved the lives of millions of people. And that's really how to be a good person, and how to be great, and how to be remembered, is not to just do things for yourself, not just to improve your own lot, even though that's where the motivation begins, that you want to improve your own lot, but it's actually to improve the lives of other people. And if you can improve the lives of millions and millions of people, well, then you'll have a legacy, you'll leave something behind. And I think we all kind of crave that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, completely. And Kevin, to take that a step, beyond into that whole void, this is the very essence of creativity. Because when you are being creative people, and I've spoken to plenty of them, and the same common thing comes back to me over and over again, that when people are in the creative flow, they say it's a flow mindset. They're in this whole, they don't understand it, and it just flows through them. And that is the essence of it, Kevin. It's, when I'm creating something, I completely understand what you're saying, and I completely concur, because it's all about the legacy. Because, like you said, the Van Gogh and stuff like this. But when you are in that creative stone, you're not thinking about your legacy. I don't know, man. I think this is one of the highest things of why is it so many cultures around the world have always had the people who've done the arts that they're held in such high status, because they tap into something. They not only they speak about the creeping immortality, but they kind of give you that glimpse, like the poets did, or the artists, and they give you that glimpse of the essence of what it's like to be human in this vast emptiness we call the universe, and how minuscule we are, but how with such a small thing that we've got, this flesh and bone meat machine, we can, like you say, not only can we leave legacies, we can manifest things. Look, this is what I always say to people now, and whenever I hear anybody and they get caught up in isms or ideologies and stuff, I say, look, we live in a time right now with our fingertips. We can manifest things through our fingertips. You can go on a computer, you can do that, and you can have, like you said, you can raise your own funds with cryptocurrency. You can go, even on a step back, you can go on your laptop and you'll have a physical object in your house. This is immense times that we live in. But what I think is crucial, and it goes back into what we're talking about, is that not only is it about leaving legacies, it's about being the creative. And this is what I'm trying to say, is it goes back to time, because you use a perfect example, and he's one of my, I have very few kind of people I look up to in my life, but Van Gogh is one of them. He's one of my, I've always been just in absolute, in awe of the guy. And I think what you spoke on is absolutely true, Kevin, because he wasn't doing it for the money. I mean, he used to give just go and read the story of Van Gogh. I mean, his whole mantra and stuff. So he wasn't doing it for the money, but all that guy wanted, and this is what his brother did for him all his life, was gave him the time to paint. And this is the crucial thing. That's why I call it, on N99, it's called seeds, for the two things you spoke upon. One, to leave the seed of a legacy, that I can leave something that will bloom into something else. And hey, I don't know if it will or not. That's one of the joys about being a creative. I mean, I've told this story many times. The amount of times I did the album cover for the Ceiling Demons, and I spent 6 months doing this intricate piece for them, and then I finished all up, sent it over to the lads and said, okay, great. And then just as an afterthought that night, I was like, okay, I've got the paints out, I'm just going to do this little little sort of sketchy thing. Took a photo of it, and that was one that ended up the album cover. And this is the great beauty when you're in that creative. That's the beauty of the creative moment. You're not thinking about the legacy. So I thought maybe my own ego did that, and that's the great lesson that the artists tell you. Like maybe my ego thought, "Oh, this is the greatest painting I've ever done," but it checks you back, it slaps you back into place, and these are the legacies you left. And that's why I say this with N99, we call it seeds, and that's why I deliberately call it that, because I think the idea of not only you can seed an idea, but the idea as well is through the technology and where we're at, we're going to be able to, through the seed concept, give people time back. And that's why I go back to Van Gogh, because anyone who's creative, everybody knows within 6 degrees of their life someone who's creative, and all that person wants, they don't want the money, they don't want the fame, all they want is just the time. Just give me the time to create. And that's what we're boiling everything down to. And again, when all the isms and all that break away, and when we wrestle with the fundamental deep philosophical questions, when it all breaks down to is time, and you just can, and out of that you look and go, okay, again, the Brehon Law can teach me all about that. And even how they dealt with time, and it goes back to, again, the burial rights do, and I think this plays a great thing with it. We've been separated in our society from death, and that goes right back to one of the things I love about ancient Irish culture was, and you see this reflected over here. I do it all the time, and it humbles me every single time I do it. At the end of my street, I told you before, there's a standing stone. And I love the idea of burial mounds. And I love the idea of stones laid upon stones. It's like that was a really high, that person deserved. And it was a reminder to people long before, they're still standing now, man, 2,000 years afterwards. That's a legacy. And that's what we're talking about, time. And then you think, okay, are we bothered about, I've always thought of the burial mounds, because you'll hear a burial mound, and all maybe that's left is a trace of a name of a person. But then it makes you, it's like it taps into that human instinct we've got. Okay, who's that person? Oh, I want to discover more. And then you go and find out who they were. And then why was there such a big mound of bricks to them? Oh, this is what they did. And this person, by what they did, they've left that legacy. And then you start to explore it, and then it starts to, and it's like a seed. It opens up in you, germinates a new idea. And this is what I love, man. The old always marries with the new. And it's one of the things that I'm fascinated in your insights is, because I speak to many people in this whole push for to push forward, and this jump into the void, which I'm all for. Great, like I say, that's the entrepreneurial way. But there's a wisdom in looking back and not throwing everything out with the bathwater, and looking back and saying, okay, how did people of old that survived for such a long time, how did they deal with that? Because as you said, the state is only an illusion that has been created for the last 200-300 years. I mean, it's a very small blip in the history of time, and we've got to learn to have the wisdom to go back and go, how did cultures do this before? And this is what I love, and I think you spoke about. That's why I love to talk about the Brehon Law, because it's kind of, to me, the most superior one of all the systems I've learned, because it doesn't have the caste system. And honestly, there's so many things, and I'm not saying it's a perfect way, because I'm sure there's many holes, and I've found many things. But generally, I think it's one of those ones that really are a shining example of not only of how to live your life, but like you say, it's a perfect example of what you spoke upon. It's a legacy that's been left. And this is one of the questions I wanted to ask you particularly. And I know it's like we've spoken about before, but you've mentioned before when you're in, I think it's in your ancient culture series, you mentioned about the fact that we've got this little fragments of the Brehon Law, and you mentioned that a lot of this could have been held, and even in private collections amongst families of the Protestants back in the day. Now, what, as far as you know, what how many people? I mean, what fields? How much resources is being spent right now into sort of trying to piece these pieces together?
Okay. Well, just a quick point on the idea of the legacies. First of all, is that while I think that there's some sort of subconscious driving motivator in man, I think it is a subconscious thing. Actually, that's the point. Is that people don't necessarily set out with that intention in mind. They honor the spark of individuality and creativity that's in them, and as a consequence of that, they happen to leave something behind of value that we retain the value of over the course of time. In terms of the resources that are being put into the Brehon Law today, honestly, I don't think there's a lot. There is an institution in Ireland called the Institute of Advanced, I think it's Institute of Advanced Studies in Dublin, and they are kind of like a statutory body, so it is a government body that have been set up to kind of research and write books about these ideas. And actually, if anybody's interested in learning more, that's a great resource. Their bookshop is really good for finding some very credible, worthwhile materials on the Brehon Law. I think the difference is that it's always dealt with in a sort of like a historical context. Like it's never really given a footing in today's world, or the people who are writing about it never seem to consider it as being relevant in today's world. It's always like, this is how it was in the past. And I have spoken to some people personally. Sometimes people send me emails from the website that individually people are interested in it and they're trying to learn more, but there's not really, and I don't know why this is. It's kind of a bit depressing, actually, when you consider that we have a lot of manuscripts in Trinity College that haven't even been translated yet. We don't even know what they say. I mean, that's like having a government having access to lots and lots of treasure chests, and they just can't be bothered to pick the lock to find out what's in the treasure chest. I mean, there could be amazing things in there. But this is where, let's kind of bring it back full circle to what's happening today with the technological revolution and things like that. I think that a lot of the values and the principles that you've recognized yourself in the Brehon Law appeal to this sort of inner nature of man, our individuality, our respect for personal freedom and things like this. And the centralist system, the centralist system of governments with legislation and politicians being elected. I mean, I don't know about you, but for me, I'm just tired of it. I just can't buy into that crap anymore. Even the presidential election is a great example of that. The circus that it was. It's just seriously, are we still going around this bleeding roundabout? And I think the reason why the Brehon Law appeals to people like yourself and people in the artist community and particularly in the blockchain and the digital revolution community is that, okay, so as the world is evolving at this rapidly changing pace, the government, let's say the government as being the old ways of doing things, the current way of doing things, is becoming redundant. It's less and less relevant to the people like ourselves, the millennial people as well, the next generation. It's less relevant. It can't keep up anyway with the advances that we're making in technology. And an advance in technology is an advance in a mindset, it's an advance in an idea. And government can't keep up with that. So what it means is then it's well, how do we as a society, as a global society, as a global community, how do we address this change in terms of social order, in terms of structure to our existence and in our relationships to one another? And when we realize that a system like this existed millennia ago, it makes us excited because we kind of go, yes, I can see how that would be relevant today, because we do need some sort of order. We do need some sort of way of principles that we can relate to each other through, standards, if you want. And so this old system, these older decentralized systems of governance, of law, of contract, appeal to us today because we need them now, because the world, as it has been for the last 50 or 100 or maybe even more, 200 years, since the centralization, maybe since the rise of the the Holy Roman Empire and the monarchies of Europe and things like that. I don't really know, I can't put my finger on it, but the world has changed. It's not changing, it has changed. And now we need to find ways, these principles, standards, laws, whatever, customs that are, human based, if you want to call it that have an altruistic vibe to them, that are independent of like any authority, any like president or dictator or whatever king telling us that this is how it should be done. And I think that's what really appeals to people about these ideas today.
Well, okay, Kevin, I want to go to a very practical step one on this. I mean, you mentioned that it's all under lock and key at Trinity. Okay, is that what? Do we have to get permission? And if that's the case, right, okay, how can we change that? I mean, is it a case of just petition these people? I mean, because I'm just thinking there's going to be a period on the curve of time where we know that AI is going to get in there and just going to be able to, with the technology of the artificial intelligence, for want of a better word, it's just going to be able to read and translate all those scripts in probably a minute. So it's only going to be a matter of time when this information is going to be released. But in the meantime, what's the practical people we can do? I mean, I know, I'm sure they're like all authorities, there is little point in, petitioning people because it's all part of the bureaucracy game. But is there actually anything practically we can do? I mean, is there a case of like if you become a member of the library, you have a right to go and have a look at these pieces of work? I mean, what's the practical steps people can take, especially people in Ireland?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest hurdle is actually that the want isn't there. I mean, the materials are there, but the want for them to be translated isn't there, and the government isn't willing to put the resources in. And then there's another aspect to this as well, is that the language of these manuscripts, because they're so old, it's not like modern Irish. It's not like the sort of Irish that I would have been taught in school, even though I can't speak it properly. It's a much older version of Irish that only very few scholars can actually read. And then the other side to it is that a lot of some of the words and phrases that are used in these old manuscripts have kind of lost their meaning today, that they're so old that even in there's old Irish, middle Irish, and then there's like modern Irish, even like the people, to give you an example, the people who like hundreds of years ago were interpreting the texts from several hundred years before then. So we're talking about people who were Brehons and who were trying to look at the manuscripts that were maybe several hundred years older than themselves. They had trouble understanding some of these phrases, and that's why you have the actual script, and then you have commentary, and then you have glosses that all happened at different points in the evolution of the Irish language. So the commentary came in when people tried to understand what the text said, and then the glosses came in to try and understand some of the words in the commentary. This, you can imagine it's a complicated affair, and it would take a lot of money to do this. It would take a lot of time to do this. I don't think it's not worth the money or the time, but somebody's going to pay for it. And who's going to pay for it? Should it be the taxpayer? I don't know. If it should be the taxpayer, I don't know if the government should pay for this. But really, it's to me, it's a shame that there isn't. That's a secondary matter, actually, that detail. The real shame is that people aren't calling for this to happen, that there isn't a want. And I think if you try to petition this with the government and you try to raise the issue, you're like, look, there's more important things going on. Mm-hmm. That's I think the attitude that you would get. It's like it's I imagine it to be like kind of seen as a niche, novelty exercise for most people. So that's a tragic thing. But I mean, with that being said, perhaps there's nothing in these manuscripts that's worth knowing. Perhaps there's nothing there that is nothing new, should I say. And let's assume that that's true, that there's nothing new to gain from them. What do we already know? We already have a lot of the principles And even though the details of these laws, we wouldn't actually bring back a law today, I don't think, where we would pay each other's debts through cattle and stuff like that. But we have broad general principles that we can extract from these detailed laws. And one of them, as I was speaking to these Mexicans today, and I said it to them, I said, at the end of the day, they said, how could it come back? And I said, it comes back not through the state or some centralized project. It comes back when we decide to treat each other with respect and dignity and honor. That's how they come back. And whatever comes out of that attitude, of that mindset that we decide to have with each other, those principles will be the new law. The principles of respect, honor, integrity, dignity that we afford to one another today. That's more important, I think, than learning about necessarily what was in the manuscripts of the past. But the manuscripts of the past can certainly give us a reason to live like that today. They give a validation to the sorts of ideas that the digital blockchain revolution are bringing up, that the internet has brought up by teaching us. That's anarchy. Like we have lived anarchy on the internet for as long as we've been using it. So because there's no government of the internet, there's no I know they're trying to regulate it, whatever, but there's not I can say what I want on the internet. My idea is, if it's a good idea, if I put up a good video, I'm going to get more views. It's going to raise up in terms of content, I guess. So that's really where I stand with it. It's not so much about going back, but looking back to go forward, looking back and trying to hear what our elders and what our ancestors are saying, not so we can copy them, but so we can honor them in today by trying to choosing to afford the same honor and respect and dignity to each other.
Yeah, and upon my friend, is one of the greatest lessons that I think that probably you can learn from the whole of history, the Brehon Law. Maybe the whole point of this conversation is that there was a great focus and great status, and the great amount of effort and time went into actually orally passing things down through human being to human being to make sure, literally word for word, sentence for sentence, and that's why it took 12 years of having to learn it, so you could be tested and say, hey, I can pass on an oral tradition, human to human to human, which would have kept everything alive. And one of the great lessons we just learned from this conversation is somewhere along the line it got lost. And it all got written down, and then it got lost, and then it was easy to destroy, and we can go into the whole history, which that's another conversation. But that simple wisdom of old times, of ancient times, like you said, not going back and living. I don't want to live 2,000 years ago. I like the idea I've got these things. I don't ever want to go backwards. That's the point of humanity, is to push forward. But the reflection we can learn is maybe there is a wisdom about keeping ideas alive, human being to human being, word to word, through conversations. And this is what I love about the technology we've got. We've got the ability. This is what I love about people like you, what you're doing on your daily life. It's spreading it word for word. Is a great way of doing it, because that's the way you can keep things alive. Because they can come after they can shut the internet down. They can shut all the books. They can burn the books. They can take the movies away. And hey, you could argue we live in a culture right now where we're not living in a forced culture with that stuff, but hey, you try getting an idea through in the culture, in the paradigm right now, we can't. So it's essential that one thing we can do, and it's what George Orwell spoke upon so eloquently in many of these books, is we can keep that idea of speech alive. We can keep the idea of spreading things and keeping an oral tradition alive, because there must have been, there's no accident that the people, as I said before, who back in the Brehon days, who spent 12 years to become the poets, and the people who could recite a great many works from just their own head and just my memory. There must have been a reason for that. It wasn't just an accident. There was a reason for it. And I think the wisdom that they were going like, okay, that's the way we can keep a legacy alive through many generations. So my question to you is, Kevin, I mean, I don't know, maybe you're the person to know. I mean, do you think there's anybody alive in Ireland right now that maybe has got an oral line of it? So, okay, like you said, the manuscripts are all lost, but do you think is any family somewhere there's been someone that's got, just kept, maybe not to the exact degree, but have kept, like the Chinese whispers, but they've got 10% of it. Do you think that goes on at all in Ireland at all now?
Yeah, I do. And just on the point that you're saying about the oral transmission of the ideas, I mean, you're hitting a great point there. One of the reasons they believe that the Druids, to go even before the specialization of the Brehons, because in an earlier point in history, the Druid was the Brehon, the Fili, the poet, should I say. He fulfilled all these offices, and then as time went on, people specialized into certain areas and they became judges or poets and so on. But they say that the reason why that they chose not to write anything down is because it can be misinterpreted, and the best way to teach is through the oral transmission, in terms of memory, in terms of comprehension and things like that. So to come back to these manuscripts, the manuscripts are not in themselves like textbooks or books to teach. They were more actually to help people remember, just like principles. They weren't very, very detailed, and they weren't like for the new student. The new student would learn orally, and they used the manuscripts just as kind of a way of reminding him. But I would say certainly that there is people in Ireland who have this knowledge and have this consciousness, this perception. I've met some of them, and there's maybe not enough. And as you say, like they probably only have portions. But it's like families in Ireland, like there's a guy I met who actually lives in Australia. His surname is O'Reilly. I'm trying to remember his first name, but he had a lot of these ideas because his father would talk to him about it, and his grandfather would talk to him about, like, oh, in the Brehon Law, in the time of the Brehon Laws, this is how things were done. There's another man in Cork, and I can't remember his name. It might come to me, and he's very much like a natural bard. What's his name? But I mean, I don't know where he got the information from. I don't know if he got it from actually like reading books and manuscripts, or if he got it because he just like has that sort of mindset where a lot of these ideas and principles come naturally to him. So there is people out there, and I think part of the work that I'm doing is I'd like to meet more of these people. And when I do come across people online, maybe they email me or whatever, we start talking, I will make a mental note of them, and we'll keep in touch wherever it's relevant to keep in touch. But what I would really like to do, I mean, at the moment, obviously, I'm not in Ireland. I'm in Czech Republic, and I'm studying. My attention is somewhere else at the moment. I can't devote as much time as I would like to these ideas. But what I'd really like to do is kind of like create this loose network of people who are interested in these ideas, and maybe next year or further down the line to create some sort of like informal, I don't want to say committee or council, but maybe like an informal gathering where we can just get together and share the ideas and share the knowledge that we have, and try to make the ideas more culturally relevant today. That's really what I think my mission is, if you want to call it that, to be the bridge between the old books that I have, books on my shelf here that I brought from home. I didn't bring many books, but the books that I brought were all about Ireland or the Irish history. But I have to assume that in today's generation, a lot of people aren't going to bother reading these books because they're dusty, they're old, they're kind of outdated, some of them. So I want to put it in a medium. I want to do the hard work and do the research and put the time into reading these books, and then try to translate it or communicate it in a medium that the modern world expects to see it in. Hence videos, interviews like this, online course, blog posts, and things like that, website. So I want to make it like one of the taglines that I have for the Brehon Law Academy is a digital hedge school for early Irish law and culture. So, I mean, yeah, the answer to the question, the short answer is yes, I do think there's people out there. There's not enough of them. And I don't know if they still think that the laws are culturally relevant today or not, or if it's just something that it's like something we reminisce about, something that we kind of miss, or we kind of mourn the loss of, which I don't really want to have that mindset myself. I want to see if they are culturally relevant today.
Well, and as you know, Kevin, I mean, you know, and I have to say this before I wrap up, but you know, the whole of the Brehon Law and everything has been a huge inspiration. It is on a daily basis what we're trying to build over here at Night and Night, because I think it's like you just spoke upon, just you know, the end of what you just said. Then I think it's something I've been focusing a lot on the last period of time, is about how can we get, and I'm sure you'll know, I mean, you're surrounded by so many, and I again, I mean, I'm just just great creative minds, and I often say this: if I could just get 10% of the people I've spoken to on Life is People, we could shape, just 10% of them. We can get them all together, and we just worked on one thing. We could literally shape the world. But the difficulty, as you know, is like herding cats. So in your experiences, I mean, as I said before, I mean, it's been, everything we did with Red 99 is speaking upon this whole idea of trying to connect people, get a place where they can interact and stuff like that. But, what lessons do you think you've learned since you've been in Prague about how, without the tools as they are right now, with the clunky tools right now, what way can we connect? Because it's on a very practical level. We can connect on Facebook, but we all know about Facebook. I mean, I can name other platforms, but is there a particular place that a lot of the people you particularly work along and you're interacting in your circles, is there a particular message board or a forum that they all gather around, so we can just start to connect some of these people? Because that's how you're going to really affect change in this planet we live on, is we start to connect these little disparate groups of people everywhere else. And I know we got clunky tools, but so from my perspective to you, I mean, is there anywhere that we can, that you would recommend that that people can go along and sort of connect and to learn more and just to spread these ideas and again have some interaction, not just a one-way street sort of thing?
And this is kind of what I hope the Brehon Law Academy would be. And I mean, I have had some live events, not online, where I've tried to, attract people who are interested and create that sort of a forum. There is obviously some message boards and things like that will talk about maybe Irish legends and Irish culture, but not specifically in the way that we're talking about here. I should mention that when you asked if there are people alive today who know about these laws, I mean, there is some great academics like Dr. Fergus Kelly, who wrote Early Irish Law. It's an amazing book. And there's also Neil MacLeod, who has written books about the subject as well. They're still alive, but again, I don't know if they see the modern relevance for the laws, or if it's just something that they look at in an academic way as being from the past. So it's something that I'd like to work towards. I mean, I do have some friends in Ireland who are very interested in the ideas, and we loosely talk about it, but to create a sort of a, in the style, let's say, of the early Irish way, to have a Dáil, which is the name for our parliament in Ireland, the Dáil, or to have an Oireachtas, as they would have called it, a gathering of like-minded people to come together and to discuss the relevance of them. I would love to see that, and it's something that I will work towards in the future once I have more free time to kind of do that, or if anybody else takes the initiative, I'd like to be part of it. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, unfortunately, not. There's not, to my knowledge, maybe there is something out there that I'm not aware of. But I think my page on Facebook, the Brehon Law Academy, is a close thing to that, where people are invited to come and, comment on the links and raise questions and to discuss these ideas in that open way. And obviously on the brehonlawacademy.ie website, you can leave comments, and I do get messages from people quite often through the website. But to try and pull it together in a way that I would love to have like an annual convention on early Irish law and culture. The Maynooth University in 2013, they did have their first ever early Irish law conference, and I was a speaker at it. Professor Fergus Kelly was there as well, and there was a number of other academics and legal professors who had written papers about the Brehon Law. I'm pretty sure they didn't do it again the next year, which is disappointing. But then, it's something that I could work towards in the future, is having a sort of a convention or gathering of, I'd rather just have it for people who are versed in the law, and not necessarily as an educational thing to invite everybody to come and listen to talks. I'd rather have it more of like a committee or a council where we sit down, we'll have some lunch together, and we'll discuss making it relevant today. That's something I would love to see, personally.
Well, I think that's something that, sure, not offline, we can, in private, man, I think that's something we can, well, let's put it down in public, man. Let's put that as a flagstone that we can both work towards, because I think that's something that we can that's a compass point we're both aiming towards, because as I said before, and I think it's been the whole thing of this conversation, the only way we're going to, literally advance as a species and not descend into some sort of barbaric, horror show, is if we get together and talk. And that hopefully is going to happen more and more and more with the tools we got. Well, before I do wrap this up, Kevin, I mean, you just mentioned it then, and I feel I have to ask, because it's kind of one of the questions I'm asked over and over again. For those people who did take up the, and did, do the ancient island and the Brehon course, when are your plans? And I know you mentioned about the fact your time is short and busy and stuff, but have you got any plans in the sort of near future to get part 2 of that up, or the next section up? Because it's something I'm asked a lot again, and I know a lot of people are interested in it.
I mean, I have been thinking a lot more about that recently, and it's something that if I wasn't, I mean, to put it in perspective, I'm doing a full-time master's and I have a full-time job. So it's like, it's hard. I mean, we spoke a lot about time on this call, but I mean, it's their choices that I've made myself. I'm not doing anything that I don't want to do, and I'm very happy in the situation that I'm in right now. I think if I wasn't studying, or when I am finished studying, it's only, I mean, I'm hoping to be finished in October or September of next year. I will be able to focus a lot more. Not only will I be able to focus a lot more on the promotion of the Brehon Law and the ideas, is that I will be better educated to do so as well. I'm studying politics, philosophy, and economics. And as you can imagine, these are subjects that will greatly help me to understand this early society and how it can, if it can, be applied to today's society. But to give you an idea of the timeline that I would like, is that once I'm finished, I have the material for the Brehon Law side of things, for the Brehon Law presentation. It's just a question of making it into videos and PowerPoints in the same way that I did for the Ancient Ireland Culture and Society online course. So I have the material there, it's ready to go. I imagine I could probably get a course done in maybe like 4 months but I'm also about 60% of the way, 60% finished the writing of a book about Ireland's place names and the origins and meaning behind Irish place names, which for me has been such a really rewarding experience, really rewarding study. I'm not fluent in Irish. I'm learning more Irish as I do this, write this book, but it's actually taught me a lot about Irish history and the legends and the families and all of these like features of our landscape. And what I would love Irish people to realize, because most of us don't speak the Irish, but you drive around the country and you can see the place name is in Irish and it's not in English, but it's the English pronunciation of an Irish word. But what you realize is that your landscape screams its history, it screams the stories of the hills around you. And I mean, that's something that I would like to have finished around this time next year. I would say maybe before Christmas next year. And I know that sounds like a long way off, but it's just kind of, that's the way it is right now. In the meantime, I mean, since I've been in the Czech Republic, which is only like 2.5 months, I've spoken at I spoke at the Hackers Congress that I told you about. I also spoke at a Students for Liberty evening, organized by the local Czech team, the Prague team of Students for Liberty. Today I spoke to the visiting Mexicans who are doing a winter school in the university I'm studying in. I'm also doing the same talk again on the 21st. So I guess I'll use this time to casually hone my skills of speaking and trying to adapt the content to suit different audiences and make it. And in that sense, I'm hoping that I'm making it more relevant today. So by this time next year, I will hopefully have achieved my master's. I will have more freedom then to kind of focus on this, which is really something that I am passionate about. So I don't see it, I don't see myself drifting away from this ambition anytime soon.
Well, all that just serves as more inspiration for me, man, because that's the whole point. I mean, these, as I said before, these are the fires that stoke my fire about N99, because I think, great, I want to get old, perfect. Let's get your book up on N99 so you get all the resources, man, because this is exactly the part of the conversation we were talking about tonight. And I'd have to say this now, my friend. I mean, I can't wait to read your book on place names of Ireland. But again, maybe it's just me pushing you as a creative. I'm thinking, great, when I always do one on Scotland, because as we spoke about in the very first conversation, the crossover between Ireland and Scotland and Ireland is. There is, I mean, the fact that they're even called different countries is almost hilarious, because they're almost one in the same kind of tribe thing. So I think that you could definitely do a whole book on Scotland as well, because and one of the things we've got up here is just cover. I mean, for instance, I'm fascinated by all the old mountain names. They've all got these, and I think, okay, well, when were these? I don't know that. I tried to do some research, and they just say, well, it's just as it was. So yeah, so many fascinating areas. But you know, this is the great essence of the conversation. And I think what you just said. It's not. You know, life isn't just about talking. Life is about sometimes doing things, and that's the very essence what your people are busy than bored, because it speaks about what you said before. Time is precious, man, and you're living you're living what you spoke upon, and you know that's again in the essence of an old wisdom and thing, because many people, as you said before, convert to signal and talk. The real essence and the real wisdom is not only just talking but doing. And you know, it's easy to come on and say things, but you actually, you know, your life is proof of, you know, every second of your life is just doing something else. You are literally, like you said, you're in that little short cannon, and you're living every moment of that little speedy ball before you hit the wall, man. So, well, before I do wrap this up, Kevin, I mean, I have to sort of thank, you know, again, it's been an insightful, you know, conversation, and I'm always kind of like always good conversations, I'm left with more questions than answers, and you know, I think there's so many more things that we can, you know, flagpole to speak upon next time we come on. But before I do go, I want to thank you for your time, because I know how precious it is. But before we do wrap this up, maybe, you know, for anyone maybe listening, what would be your parting message for anyone, you know, listening to tonight's conversation?
Oh, well, that kind of puts me on the spot, but the first thing that springs to mind, it's something that I say often. You know, I often come back to it even for myself, and that's like, it's the privilege and the duty of the current living generation, that's you and me and everybody else who's alive right now, to decide what world we live in. It's our right to alter that world. And we have limited capacity to do this through our mind, through our physical strength. And we can make our ability to change this world stronger when we work together with people of like mind. So I guess my message is, my closing words is to just live your life, create spark, you know, connect with people who make you feel alive, make other people feel alive. And to finish on one of my favorite quotes of all times by Albert Camus: in an unfree world, if it is unfree, you must become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion. So I guess I'd finish on that, and I just hope more and more people join the rebellion in their own hearts and their lives too. And by the rebellion, I don't mean go out and burn down buildings or throw bricks. It means like, be different, create, innovate, you know, walk your own path, sing your own tune, and be your own person.
Perfect. I couldn't have said any better myself. Well, from over here in Scotland and over there in Prague, I just want to say life is people, people.
Thank you.